In this video, I want to talk about cutting and swagging copper tubing. Okay, cutting tubing is a process of cutting the pipe with tubing cutter. The tubing cutter is the most often used with soft drawn and smaller diameter hard drawn tubing. So cutting with a tubing cutter, what we're doing is we're putting the tubing cutter on the roller blades. Okay, and we use a cutting wheel to go around and around the pipe, slowly tightening it until we do. So place a mark on the tube where it's to be cut. Place the tubing in the cutter and align it with the cutting wheel with the mark on the tube. Tighten the adjusting screw handle until a moderate pressure is applied to the tubing. Don't over tighten it, you're going to bend the tubing. Okay, so what you're doing is you're applying a moderate pressure. Revolve the cutter around the tube, keeping a moderate pressure applied to the tubing by gradually turning the adjusting handle. Don't apply excessive pressure because it can break the cutter wheel and it can also pinch and constrict the opening in the tubing. Continue until the tubing is cut. Okay, so once the tubing's cut, it just sort of falls apart. When the cut is finished, the excess material, called a burr, that was pushed into the pipe by the cutting wheel must be removed. Burrs cause turbulence and restrict the flow of fluid or vapor passing through the pipe. The reamer located at the back of the tubing cutter is used to remove the burrs caused by the cutting process. The reamer should be pivoted from the back of the cutter so the blade portion extends past the cutter. The reamer is then inserted into the pipe while applying pressure and is rotated to remove any burrs from the interior of the pipe. Any burrs on the outside of the pipe can be removed with the file portion of the reamer. So again, this is, you have a reamer. Let me see if I can circle this for you. Okay. We have the reamer going into the pipe here. Okay, and this is actually on the back of your pipe cutter. There's an extra cutting wheel that's normally located under the reamer, by the way, in case you haven't seen that. Now, swagging, once we have the pipe cut, is the process at which two pieces of soft drawn copper tubing with the same diameter can be joined together without additional fittings. Okay, what we do is we stretch one end of the section. Hard drawn tubing is not intended to be swagged. Don't try. Okay, swag tubing looks like this. I started off with the same piece of same size tubing, and I stretched the end of one of it to fit over the other. Now remember, that's about 1/8 of an inch. We have to stretch that to make it fit properly. So to do this, locate the proper hole in the flaring block. The proper hole is marked with the measurement that corresponds to the outside diameter of the tubing. Insert the section of soft drawn copper tubing to be swagged into the proper hole in the flaring block so that the tubing extends a distance equal to the diameter of the tube plus about 1/8 of an inch. So again, it needs to extend a distance of the diameter of the tube plus about 1/8 of an inch. Make certain that the end of the tubing to be swagged produces from the side of the block that has the beveled end. Tighten the flaring block around the tubing. Apply pressure and tighten the wing nuts equally to ensure that the two pieces of block are secure and the tubing is evenly. Okay, if this tubing is in there at an angle, it's not going to it's not going to swag properly. Okay, so this is a correct swag tubing installation. Place the drop of refrigerant oil on the swagging tool to reduce the friction between the swagging tool and the tubing. Insert the swagging tool into the tubing and strike the swagging tube firmly with a hammer, rotating the flaring block half turn and strike the swagging tool again. Repeat the previous steps until the swag has reached a diameter approximately equal to the diameter of the tubing. Now, the newer flaring blocks and swagging blocks do not require you to use a hammer. You're just going to tighten it down. Okay, so again, swagging tool goes in there. You can actually see that this side here up to this line will fit into this pipe. Once it's in, okay, you start putting pressure on it either through with a hammer or with a flare yoke, which is also fitting on here. And you want the tubing to be up to the next line. Okay, and it will have stretched it enough for you. Okay, strike it with a hammer. Okay, there's additional ways to do this. Okay, there's different size tubing kits. There's a lot of different tools out there for this. Another method of doing this is, again, the flare blocks. Most of this is what you now have in your tool bags, okay? The flare swagging kits. Okay, we have our flare tool here that goes on the yoke. We also have swagging tips of different sizes that goes on the yoke. After swagging, always inspect the tubing for cracks or defects of any kind. If they're seen or even suspected, cut off that swag and start over. If there's no defects, assemble the joints and the tubing should fit together easily. So again, you're just putting it together. One side will now fit inside the other. Now, I could have done this whole thing with a coupling. Okay, I could have left my tube the same size. I could have put a coupling in the center here and put these together. But why should I have to worry about two joints leaking when I could just have one? That's why swagging is used more oftenly.